Did the Toronto Maple Leafs make a catastrophic mistake by letting Mason Marchment walk away? That's the narrative that keeps popping up whenever Toronto struggles to score. The romantic idea that the Leafs let one of their own slip through their fingers only to watch him blossom into a power forward elsewhere. The hometown kid who got away. The developmental success story that's now haunting the organization that gave up on him. But here's the uncomfortable truth that's going to upset some people. Mason Marchment was never the answer. He's a mirage. A player whose one good season has created a mythology that doesn't match reality. And the proof? He's currently making $4.5 million to score at a fourth-line pace. Meanwhile, Bobby McMann, the player nobody talks about, the guy Toronto actually kept, is delivering comparable production for less than one-third of the cost. And when you actually break down the numbers instead of relying on nostalgia, and what if fantasies, the comparison isn't even close. The Maple Leafs didn't miss out on a game-changer. They dodged a bullet. The Marchment mythology, how legends are born. Let's start with why Mason Marchment even became a talking point in Toronto. Marchment came up through the Maple Leafs farm system, carrying that special glow that homegrown prospects always have. There's something about one of our own that resonates with fans. The idea that Toronto developed this talent, nurtured it, and should reap the rewards. When Marchment left for Florida and then Dallas, he had stretches where he looked legitimate. His best season came in 2023-24 with the Stars, 22 goals and 31 assists for 53 points. Those are solid top six numbers, the kind of production that makes people say, see, Toronto let him go, and he became exactly what they needed. But here's what that narrative conveniently ignores. Context. Marchment put up those numbers playing alongside elite talent in Dallas, a team loaded with offensive weapons, a system designed to maximize his 6'5" frame and long reach, and line mates who could create space and opportunities. He wasn't driving offense, he was benefiting from it. And even in that perfect situation, with everything aligned in his favor, he managed just 22 goals. That's good, not great. That's a complimentary piece, not a game changer. Since that season, Marchment's production has fallen off a cliff. After being traded to Seattle, he's managed just 4 goals and 9 points in 29 games. That's a pace for roughly 11 goals over a full season, while carrying a $4.5 million cap hit. Let me repeat that. $4.5 million for 11 goal pace production. That's not a missed opportunity. That's a contract you actively avoid. The Bobby McMahon reality. Quiet excellence. Now, let's talk about the player Toronto actually has, Bobby McMahon. McMahon doesn't have the romantic backstory. He's not the hometown kid with the recognizable last name. He spent years grinding in the AHL, putting in the work without the spotlight, waiting for his opportunity. When he finally got consistent NHL time, he didn't make headlines. He just quietly produced. Last season, McMahon posted 20 goals and 14 assists in 74 games. That's 34 points. Comparable to what Marchment has delivered in most of his seasons, and not far off from Marchment's career year when you account for ice time and opportunity. But here's where it gets interesting. McMahon did this while making $1.35 million. Let's do the math on value. Marchment is making $4.5 million for his current 11-goal pace. McMahon made $1.35 million for 20 goals. That's better production at 30% of the cost. In a salary cap league, that difference is absolutely massive. That extra $3.15 million in cap space can be the difference between adding a legitimate top 4 defenseman or being stuck with a depth piece. It can mean keeping a key role player or watching them walk in free agency. McMahon brings everything Marchment offers, size at 6'2" and 217 pounds, physicality, secondary scoring, left shot versatility, without the inflated price tag. He's not flashy. He doesn't have highlight reel moments that go viral. But he shows up, does his job, and contributes consistently. In the world of championship contending teams, that reliability is worth its weight in gold. The system player problem. Here's the fundamental issue with Mason Marchment. He's a system player whose value is entirely dependent on his surroundings. Look at his career trajectory. In Florida, he had flashes playing with high-end talent. In Dallas, he had his best season surrounded by stars like Jason Robertson, Rupe Hintz, and Joe Pavelski. The star system is built to create chaos in front of the net, and Marchment's size made him effective in that role. But when you remove those ideal circumstances, when you put him in a different system with different line mates, the production disappears. His stint in Seattle proves this conclusively. The Kraken aren't a bad team, but they don't have the offensive firepower Dallas had. And suddenly Marchment looks completely ordinary. This is the trap that teams fall into all the time. They see a player produce in one situation and assume that production is portable. They think, if we bring him here, he'll do the same thing for us. But hockey doesn't work that way. System players need the right system. Complementary players need elite line mates to complement. When you pay $4.5 million for a player whose value is entirely situational, you're gambling that you can recreate those perfect circumstances. And more often than not, that gamble fails. Bobby McMann, by contrast, has shown he can produce in Toronto's system with Toronto's line mates, in Toronto's usage patterns. There's no guesswork. There's no hoping he'll adapt. He's already proven he fits. The age and contract timeline problem. Let's talk about something that often gets overlooked in these comparisons: age and contract trajectory. Mason Marchment is 30 years old. In hockey terms, that means he's likely already peaked or very close to it. Power forwards, especially ones who rely on size and physicality, tend to decline in their early 30s as their skating deteriorates and injuries accumulate. Marchment's best season, that 53-point campaign in Dallas, might be the ceiling. And if his current production in Seattle is any indication, the decline has already begun. Bobby McMann is 29, just 1 year younger, but he's on a completely different contract timeline. His $1.35 million deal is team-friendly and flexible. If he continues producing at his current rate, Toronto has a bargain. If his production drops slightly, they're not handcuffed by an unmovable contract. Marchment's $4.5 million deal, on the other hand, becomes increasingly problematic with each passing year. If he's producing 4 goals in 29 games now, what happens when he's 32 or 33? That contract goes from questionable to albatross territory real fast. Championship teams can't afford to have $4.5 million tied up in declining assets. The salary cap is unforgiving, and every dollar wasted on underperforming veterans is a dollar you can't spend on impact players. Toronto made the smart, long-term decision by investing in McMahon instead of chasing the Marchment mythology. The emotional versus analytical decision. This is where we need to address the emotional component of this debate, because that's really what drives the "we should have kept Marchment" narrative. Fans love the idea of homegrown talent succeeding. There's something deeply satisfying about watching a player you developed become a star. It validates the organization's scouting and development process. It creates a connection between the fan base and the player. When Marchment left and had that good season in Dallas, it felt like Toronto had made a mistake. It felt like they gave up on him too soon, like they didn't give him a fair chance. But feelings don't win championships. Analytics do. Smart roster construction does. Making difficult, unemotional decisions about player value does. The Maple Leafs front office looked at Marchment's production, his age, his contract demands, and his fit within their system, and they made a calculated decision. He wasn't worth the investment. They bet that they could find comparable production elsewhere for less money. And they were right. Bobby McMann has delivered everything Marchment would have provided at a fraction of the cost, while fitting seamlessly into Toronto's lineup. That's not luck, that's good management. The emotional decision would have been to overpay Marchment because of his connection to the organization. The analytical decision was to let him walk and invest that money elsewhere. Toronto chose analytics over emotion, and they're better for it. The bigger picture, building a championship roster, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture of roster construction, because this is where the Marchment versus McMahon debate becomes really important. The Toronto Maple Leafs are in a championship window. They have elite talent up front, solid goaltending, and a system that, despite recent struggles, can compete with anyone when firing on all cylinders. But they're operating in a salary cap environment that requires every dollar to be maximized. Paying Mason Marchment $4.5 million for 11-goal production would have been a catastrophic misallocation of resources. That money could go toward a legitimate top-four defenseman who can move the puck and play 20-plus minutes, a depth center who can win faceoffs and kill penalties, a backup goaltender who can steal games when needed, retaining key role players who might otherwise walk in free agency. Every roster decision has opportunity costs. When you overpay one player, you're limiting your ability to address other needs. Championship teams understand this. They make ruthless decisions about value and fit, even when those decisions are unpopular. The Marchment mythology persists because people want to believe Toronto made a mistake. They want a simple explanation for why the team hasn't won a cup. If only we'd kept Marchment is easier than confronting the complex reality of building a championship roster in a cap era. But the truth is that letting Marchment walk was exactly the right decision. It freed up cap space, it avoided a potentially problematic long-term contract, and it allowed Toronto to develop and utilize Bobby McMann, a player who provides comparable value at a much better price. That's not a mistake. That's smart management. The Mason Marchment narrative is seductive because it plays into our natural tendency to romanticize the one that got away. We want to believe that Toronto let a star slip through their fingers, that they failed to recognize talent when they had it. But when you strip away the emotion and look at the cold, hard facts, the story changes completely. Marchment is a 30-year-old system player whose best season came in ideal circumstances, and who's now producing at a fourth-line rate while making top-six money. Bobby McMahon is delivering comparable, arguably better, production at less than one-third of the cost. The Maple Leafs didn't miss out on a game-changing winger. They made the smart, analytical decision that championship-contending teams need to make. They chose value over nostalgia, practicality over sentiment. Sometimes the quiet guy in your system, the one nobody talks about, the one who doesn't have the sexy backstory, turns out to be the smarter investment. Bobby McMahon is that guy, and every time Mason Marchment goes pointless while making $4.5 million, Toronto's decision looks better and better. The Leafs got this one right. It's time we stop pretending otherwise. If you're still convinced Toronto made a mistake with Marchment, or if you think I'm completely wrong about Bobby McMahon, I want to hear your argument in the comments below. Show me the numbers that prove Marchment was worth $4.5 million. Explain how Toronto would be better off with him instead of McMahon. Because from where I'm sitting, this isn't even a debate, it's a masterclass in smart roster management. And if you want to stay ahead of every Maple Leafs roster decision, every trade rumor, and every analytical breakdown that cuts through the noise, hit that subscribe button. This team is going to make more moves, and you'll want to know whether they're brilliant or disastrous before everyone else figures it out.